There is a specific, terrifying way the British monarchy destroys its enemies, and it never involves raised voices, public arguments, or dramatic royal statements. It happens through the quiet, clinical execution of administrative protocol, where a person is systematically erased from an institution before they even realize they have walked into a trap. At precisely 20 minutes past 2 on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Westminster, Laura Lopes, the biological daughter of Queen Camilla, walked into a public hall believing she held the ultimate political leverage over the future of the crown. Less than 120 seconds later, she was reduced to an unvetted security risk, escorted out into the rain by armed protection officers, and permanently severed from every financial, social, and administrative privilege her mother spent 30 years attempting to secure. What the public was told over the following days was a sanitized story about an emotional family spat over estate money, but the security logs, access records, and raw camera angles tell a story that is infinitely more sinister. This was not a sudden, explosive argument between relatives. It was a premeditated, weaponized ambush engineered to back the future king into a public corner. And the only reason it failed is that the 76-year-old woman standing 4 feet away happened to be the most lethal strategist in the entire House of Windsor. To understand why this moment sent shockwaves through the highest levels of British intelligence and royal administration, you have to look beyond the surface headlines and examine the cold forensic reality of what took place behind closed doors. For weeks leading up to that rainy afternoon, the royal household had been undergoing an aggressive, uncompromising financial audit. Ordered directly by Prince William with the relentless tactical backing of Princess Anne, this audit was not a standard accounting review. It was a line-by-line reconciliation of every single pound distributed across the Crown estates over the last 15 years. For decades, informal allowances, unrecorded consultancies, and private favors had flowed smoothly into the hands of peripheral figures associated with Queen Camilla's private circle. But Prince William was building a lean, bulletproof monarchy for his own future reign, and his first order of business was closing every single backdoor. When formal notices were served requesting proof of work for historical stipends, panic rippled through Camilla's inner network, and certain individuals realized that their informal access to crown wealth was being systematically shut down forever. The venue chosen for Laura Lopes's public intervention was a minor charity showcase for rural development at the Royal Horticultural Halls in Westminster. It was an intentionally modest event filled with trestle tables, regional food producers, handwritten labels on jars of honey, and a Cumbrian farmer standing patiently behind a display of seed potatoes, waiting for his 90 seconds of royal attention. Princess Anne was working the floor with the clinical, military precision she has displayed for over 50 unbroken years. Dressed in a structured navy coat and gold brooch, she moved methodically from vendor to vendor without a single wasted movement or a glance at her watch. Standing just 2 displays down was Catherine, the Princess of Wales. That pairing was no coincidence. The Princess of Wales does not attend a minor agricultural showcase in Westminster by accident. Her presence was orchestrated weeks in advance by senior palace strategists to produce a very specific photograph for the global press. It was designed as the ultimate visual symbol of royal continuity, the most disciplined royal of her generation, standing directly beside the future queen, projecting absolute stability to a nation that had spent nearly 30 years measuring the family against the lingering shadow of Princess Diana. Someone outside the official palace infrastructure saw that event notice on the public calendar and recognized a completely different, far more dangerous opportunity. In the press pen at the back of the hall, amidst the usual small regional media pool, stood a freelance photographer holding a high-powered telephoto lens. He was positioned at the back of the hall on a precise diagonal. That specific angle mattered because it was the only vantage point in the entire venue from which a camera could clearly capture the facial expressions of anyone standing at the third display table along. He had been standing in that exact spot since the doors opened to the public, never shifting his stance and never taking photographs of the other vendors. He was not covering a rural showcase. He was waiting for a target to step into his line of sight. At 20 minutes past 2, Laura Lopes made her move. Entering through a restricted side door, she bypassed the main security perimeter where public credential checks were being strictly enforced. Laura, an art curator, mother of 2, and a woman who had spent her adult life attending 2 high-profile events a year while maintaining complete public privacy, walked across the stone floor with fast, deliberate steps. She did not wander, she did not look at the displays, and she made no attempt to check her surroundings. She moved through the crowd with absolute certainty, heading straight toward the Princess of Wales, stopping precisely 6 feet behind Catherine and waiting for a natural pause in Catherine's conversation with the Cumbrian farmer. The moment the gap appeared, Laura stepped forward into the space. There was no curtsy, no formal greeting, and no lowering of her voice, a basic courtesy everyone automatically extends under an arched glass ceiling where acoustics carry a whisper 20 feet across a room. 4 witnesses standing nearby heard every single word that left her mouth. Laura looked directly at Catherine and declared in a loud, clear voice that the recent financial restructuring across the royal estates was a deliberate, malicious insult to her family, adding that everyone involved knew precisely what they were doing. The media spent the following week labeling this an emotional outburst, but the physical mechanics of the incident prove it was nothing of the sort. An outburst happens in a private corridor, a parking lot, or at the tail end of a tense family dinner when tempers flare unexpectedly. An outburst does not involve an unauthorized side entrance, a manually forged access pass, 3 friendly regional journalists standing nearby, and a freelance photographer pre-positioned on a diagonal angle. A woman who was explicitly excluded from a guest list walked into a public engagement to air a private financial grievance directly in front of the press pool. That was not a loss of control. It was a pre-arranged public delivery designed to force the future queen into an embarrassing defensive confrontation. If Catherine had argued back, looked flustered, or retreated in visible anger, the freelance photographer at the back of the hall would have captured the exact image his handlers required: a fractured royal house caught in an ugly mid-afternoon shouting match. That single photograph would have dominated global news cycles for months, creating a massive public relations disaster that would have forced Prince William to halt the estate audits just to buy peace. But Catherine did not give them a single frame of footage. Drawing on 14 years of flawless public discipline, Catherine took half a step backward, locked her face into a mask of total, icy neutrality, and looked at Laura Lopes the way you look at a stranger who has just committed a fatal, irreversible error. She did not answer, she did not blink, and she did not engage, leaving the silence to stretch uncomfortably beneath the glass roof while the Cumbrian farmer stood frozen, holding his potato in complete shock. And then, 4 feet to the left, Princess Anne executed the most surgically destructive maneuver seen in public life in 20 years. The Princess Royal did not turn around immediately, a detail every witness in that room noted with chilling clarity. First, she adjusted her gloves. Right wrist first, then left wrist, pulling the cuffs down smoothly with deliberate, agonizing slowness, just as she has done in tens of thousands of official photographs across 5 decades. Then she stood completely motionless for 3 full seconds. In a crowded venue with 200 people, 3 seconds of absolute stillness feels like an eternity. The ambient chatter across the entire hall evaporated instantly. A broadcast cameraman swung his lens around without being told, and the only sound remaining in the building was the heavy rain hitting the glass roof above. When Princess Anne finally turned to face Laura Lopes, there was no anger on her face and no elevation in her voice. What she delivered was a masterclass in institutional execution. Looking past Laura, Anne addressed the chief of the protection detail in a clear, ordinary tone, and asked a single question. Has security verified the guest list for this afternoon's session? With those 9 words, she simply raised her right hand 6 inches, a subtle physical signal her personal protection officer had been reading for 30 years. Moving swiftly through the crowd without hurrying, the officer placed himself directly between Laura and the royals, blocking the photographer's line of sight, and firmly informed Laura that her presence was no longer appropriate and that she was required to step out into the lobby immediately. The entire encounter, from Laura's first step into the hall to the heavy doors closing behind her, took under 120 seconds. While the venue was being cleared, Palace security launched an immediate trace into how a banned individual had bypassed Tier 1 security protocols at an event hosting 2 senior working royals. Within 11 minutes, they uncovered the breach. The VIP pass had not been issued through official state channels or any of the 4 household offices authorized to clear guests. It had been generated locally by the regional director of the host organization, a man in his 60s with long-standing social ties to Queen Camilla's private circle, who had been asked as an informal personal favor to add Laura's name to the restricted list by hand. By nightfall, that director was suspended, and the incident was officially logged as a Tier 1 accreditation failure, the most severe security violation possible, reserved for instances where protected royals are exposed to unvetted individuals. For 40 seconds, the only sound in that briefing room was the loud, rhythmic shutter click recorded on the raw video track, echoing through the silent room like a clock ticking down. William turned off the projector and looked directly at the director of security. He did not ask for an explanation or a damage control assessment. He demanded a name, the specific internal asset inside the palace who had enabled the access, when an aide attempted to deflect. Claiming the invitation had originated from an outside regional branch, William shut him down instantly, asking whether that branch had been briefed on the standing restrictions regarding the Parker Bowles family. When the aide nodded, William asked for the name of the person who had overruled the briefing. The room went dead silent. William reached for a red-tagged, restricted dossier sitting on the table titled Internal Influences. This document maps out the informal, off-the-books relationships that cut across the official palace hierarchy marriages, old-school ties, personal favors, and family loyalties. In less than 60 seconds, William identified the link, a mid-level manager in the palace administration married to a personal assistant working directly inside Queen Camilla's private household office. William looked at the director of security and delivered one single command. 20 minutes later, that manager was escorted through the back gates by 2 armed officers, carrying nothing and stripped of his credentials after 11 years of service. The message echoed through every corridor of the royal households. Prince William was no longer waiting to inherit the throne to clean house. He was executing the purge in real time.